Alrighty, welcome back, rowing fans. We are back for our second flight of racing here. We've got the first boats headed back up the North Shore Channel. Passing us now is our St. Ignatius Girls Varsity 4. This boat is made up of many of our senior rowers on the St. Ignatius team. These girls have been with the team for about 4 years now, competing in their final season. Obviously, their last 2 years on the team were significantly affected by the pandemic, but it is just great to see them get a senior season here and get out. Good, so that is the Ignatius Senior 4. They are rowing in the Alex McDonald, named after a former St. Ignatius girls rower. That's actually the shell that I myself competed in as a St. Ignatius rower. As a reminder, I am your host, Caroline Hurley. I am a St. Ignatius novice coach and an alum of the St. Ignatius rowing program. For those of you that were with us for our first flight of racing, it was excellent to see. It was exciting. We had some really close finishes there. Couple of wins for Loyola, and then St. Ignatius Varsity Girls 8 took the final race. So we are back out here at the Jesuit Cup Regatta for the first time in over 2 years. On the north branch of the Chicago River here. Conditions have really held throughout the day, so we are under the Main Street Bridge in Skokie here, so no rain for us and our camera crew, but light rain for the rowers. But as you can see, it's really just a light drizzle. This water is perfect. Very flat water, very good for these rowers for just not really having any big weather conditions to contend with. We've got almost no wind on the channel here, and that'll really help all crews, especially our novices, just get their blade work in clean and just really try and hold it together on this race. In our second flight of racing here, we'll have a couple of different events going on. So we will have a Girls Varsity 4 event. We'll see 2 of those races. Similar to on the first flight, we saw 2 Varsity Boys 4s. We will see 2 Varsity Girls 4s going by here. We will also see a Boys Novice 8 event, and we will also see a Girls Novice 4 event. So a little bit of a flip-flop from the morning. We will not be racing Varsity Boys 8s today, but we will be racing some of these other boat classes here. So coming down the channel right now, it's our second Girls Varsity 4 coming up. And these crews, they're on the warm-up here. The nice thing with the second flight of racing is many of the athletes, both on Loyola and on the St. Ignatius side, they've already got 1 race under their belts today. Get a little bit of those butterflies out, get those muscles warmed up. So we should see some really good, hopefully some really close racing here in the second set of the day. But right now, these crews, they're just on their warm-up, heading up to the start line, just trying to get into a rhythm. This crew, they came out of the 8. Now they're in a smaller boat, in a 4. We'll see them coming by here. Now, one thing that you'll notice about the St. Ignatius 4 as it comes by is we'll see 2 rowers with their oars and what's called their riggers on the same side of the boat right in a row here. So on the side closest to us, we've got 2 starboards right in a row. That's actually called a bucket rig. The St. Ignatius coaches they're big fans of rigging their boats that way. Mixed opinions in the rowing community about what is the faster rig, but the St. Ignatius girls have been competing in bucket rigged boats for years now. So looking pretty good. We are waiting to see some of these Loyola girls 4s come by. Right, and yeah, some really interesting racing this morning. One of the takeaways that we saw, we actually saw the Loyola crews rating quite a bit lower than some of these St. Ignatius crews here, and that did pay off big for them in some of the morning racing, particularly in our novice racing. I talked a little bit on our morning broadcast. I guess we're still in the morning here, but on our earlier broadcast about what rating can do for a crew, and so rating is otherwise known as strokes per minute, and that is literally how fast they are taking strokes, and they are kind of moving through the race here. And so that rating will be determined by the coxswain, who in the 8s is sitting up at the front of the boat, looking at all of the rowers ahead of them. And in the fours, we'll actually see the coxswains laying down in the bow of the boat. So they'll be behind all the rowers laying down. Gives them a really clear vantage point, really good view of the course. So those coxswains, they will be determining the rating. That's really a strategic call to make on their parts. And so, they'll give the crew direction as far as how many strokes a minute they want them to row. In these spring races, it can really vary. Typically crews will rate a little bit higher in these shorter spring races than they do in the fall. In our varsity crews, we'll see them, up in the range of 34, 35 strokes a minute. But this morning, what we saw with Loyola was super interesting. They were rating a little bit lower. We saw a lot of their crews come down at about a 28, 29, 30 strokes a minute. That's more the type of rating that you see in a fall race, but what it did for the Loyola boats today, especially for those novices, was it just gave them a little bit more time to row together, and that's really key in novice rowing. The one boat that we did see up at that higher rating was that St. Ignatius Girls Varsity 8. We clocked them at a 35 strokes a minute coming through the bridge here, and that gave them a good edge over the Loyola crew that was a little bit lower. So we'll see how these girls' varsity boats decide to go about that in the fours. We'll see what the coxswains call, what kind of rating those stroke seats are setting. As far as positions in a rowing crew, it's obviously a little bit different than positions on a basketball team or a football team, but there are some sort of specific and strategic positions to a rowing crew. Not every seat is the same. So the rowing that you guys are seeing this morning is called sweep rowing. That is when the rowers only have one oar and they're each, only on one side of the boat. There's also scull rowing, which is when each rower will have two oars, one in each hand, and they will be reaching out over both sides of the boat. So today we are competing in what is called sweep rowing. We've got our ports, which from the coxswain's perspective are the right side of the boat. Rower's perspective, I guess it would be ports would be the left side of the boat for the coxswains. Starboards would be to the right, excuse me. And so each rower will have a side. Sometimes rowers only like to row one side and they kind of get comfortable there and they stay a port or a starboard. Other rowers can row both sides and switch interchangeably, which is really helpful for a coach when trying to shuffle crews around. But yeah, so we've got, that's the first thing to know about rowing is that we've got our two sides, port and starboard, in sweep rowing. From there, we've got kind of our different positions through the boat. So in an 8 boat, that rower that is closest to the coxswain, up in the stern, up at the front of the boat, that is the stroke seat, seat number 8. The stroke seat is responsible for setting that rating and setting that rhythm that the coxswain calls. So all of the other rowers, they are following the stroke seat. There does seem to be a bit of a misconception in rowing. A lot of spectators think that the coxswain is actually, calling row, row, row every stroke. But really, there's actually no need for that. The rowers, they know to follow their stroke seat, and that rhythm really comes naturally. And that frees up the coxswain to say a lot of other things, to make a lot of strategic calls, to give the rowers information about how far they are into the race, how close they might be to another crew. So the coxswain is sort of free to make those strategic calls. The stroke seat will be setting that rhythm. Behind stroke seat, we've got 7 seat. 7 seat, often a starboard, but sometimes they can be a port. 7 seat, their main job is really just to back up that stroke seat and to really, back them up on that rhythm that they're setting down, really just, lay down a good pace for the crew. So that's what we're looking to see from 7 seat. Following 7 seat, that middle of the boat, seats 6, 5, 4, and 3. That's really the powerhouse of the shell. That's typically where coaches will put some of their really strong rowers, and we like to see a lot of power coming from that middle of the crew. Our bottom pair there in the bow, that's called our bow pair. Those are seats 2 and 1. Sometimes it'll be smaller rowers, or it'll just be really, technically sharp rowers. And what we love to see from the bow is just really good technique, really good timing. It's really important that, the rowers in the bow, because they're so far from that stroke, that they stay on time. So coming down right now, coming down the course, we've got our St. Ignatius Boys Novice 8. So this is made up of a mix of freshmen and sophomores, but all of them, this, is kind of their first big spring race here. We've had a slight change in the conditions in the last few minutes as I've been chatting away. We've got just a little bit steadier rain. No wind has really picked up, but the rain is definitely a little bit steadier. I'm definitely thankful to be dry under the bridge. I know the feeling of being a coxswain sitting cold and wet in the rain because, the coxswains are not moving to keep warm. So, I do feel for them, and it looks like our coxswain here, Ella Gillespie, she's all bundled up, ready for this race. Coming through here, this is the St. Ignatius Novice Boys 8. We've got our stroke seat Eli up there closest to Ella. And then we've got Aiden Aqui in 7, and Aiden is going to be backing up Eli on that rating. Good, and so they are just moving through their warm-up here, moving up to that start line. We've got a few more spectators under the bridge here with us now. So we've got, some of our rowers, some of our parents. And like I said during our morning broadcast, it is just great to be back out here watching racing, and enjoying what used to be a very normal activity during, the spring months. Typically, these crews and these athletes, they will be traveling every weekend, starting from pretty much the end of March or early April. They will travel every weekend all over the Midwest, competing against other high school crews. Many spring regattas will be on much larger waterways with, 6 boats across instead of just 2 like we've got here. We are hoping and we are expecting to be competing at the Midwest Championships on the first weekend of May in Cincinnati, Ohio. That regatta will be much bigger. We will see crews from all over the Midwest. We'll typically see crews from Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio, kind of all coming together, competing for qualifying spots for the National Championship Regatta.